Hear ye, hear ye. Okay, it's June, everybody. We lighten up a little bit. All right, so I'm calling the meeting to order. And let's go ahead and all stand for the pledge and the salute to the New Mexico flag. Alrighty then. Next item is approval of the agenda. I just want to take a quick gander.
Recommend we approve the agenda.
Second.
Alrighty. And so at this point, before we're going to vote on anything, I need to note that Board Member Price is not able to be here this evening. And while we expect Board Secretary Rudy Garcia to be here, we don't know when. Because it's election day and he's running for county commission. So he's out there in New Mexico for him, giving everybody hot dogs and a scotch. No, not really. Did anybody have any changes for the agenda? Okay, me neither. Just wanted to see if there was going to be somebody waiting for us. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record show that the three of us that are present voted yes.
Mr. Garcia?
Well, híjole, there's Mr. Garcia. You want to say yes to the agenda?
Yes.
Yes to the agenda for Board Member Garcia. How are you, brother? Shaking hands, kissing babies, kissing horses. So next we're going to go into executive session. And Mr. Secretary, sir, would you like to lead us into executive session?
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you. Sorry for being a little bit late. I'd like to make a motion to put us into executive session for limited personnel matters, threat and pending litigation, as well as discussion and purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property.
And I'll go ahead and second that. And we're going to take a vote. All those in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. So we are now in executive session.
Where's the audience at?
I can answer that. No, it's just we're doing a contract for 1.286 within the scope of the work that's already been approved. It's not additional money, because that would have come to CRC first.
Thank you.
That's correct.
All right. Additional thoughts on items A, B, C, or D? All right, so we're going to take a consent vote on A, budget adjustments, B, contracts over 50, C, school nutrition and statewide services, and D, playground equipment. And we'll do a roll call on this portion of consent, starting with Ms. Price.
I have just one quick question.
Of course.
I can't remember now, but when I read it, it looks like there's. Never
I
mind.
remember, Ms. Price, it was a question that you had on the Cassidy and why it looked like it was a splitting of POs, but it's actually different work, is my understanding, Mr. Halford?
Superintendent Garcia, Board President Carrillo, members of the board,
I see.
Board Member Price. Actually, it's done, I think, more for an internal tracking. The procurement requirement was already met when we did the original RFP last year. So it's just done for tracking purposes.
So it's divided into 4 contracts for tracking, is that?
Yeah, I believe
Got
so.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia?
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I have one more question in regards to the $205,000 that's actually district-wide locations for maintenance and repair of playground equipment. I don't know if, Gabe, if you can help me with that, because I do know that Remedios Thomas is in dire need of a playground replacement. So if you can tell me what.
Superintendent and board members, President Carrillo. Yes, that is part of the improvements, the upgrades that has previously been approved, but this is the contract for the purchase of those items, the playground equipment specifically. And since the contract is over $50,000, it goes to the board for approval. So each contract, multi-million-dollar contract, has different services or materials that are being provided, and that's why it's separated this way.
So, Mr. President, Gabe, so that money is actually going to be spent at Remedios Thomas?
I apologize, I thought you were referring to the Pinon Elementary playground equipment.
Yes, it's Pinon, is my understanding.
Mr. President?
Yes.
It goes in a cycle in terms of when they're up for new equipment. And there's a certain amount allocated to that. So I can get back to you as to when Ramirez Thomas would be next, but there are other schools that were probably ahead of Ramirez Thomas, even though Ramirez Thomas probably does need replacement, but we never have any equipment that we would let people use that's unsafe. So I can get back to you and let you know when Ramirez Thomas will be on cycle.
Thank you.
Are we
Yes,
back
Mr.
to the vote?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right.
So Ms. Price
Yes.
and Ms. Noble,
Yes.
Secretary Garcia.
Yes.
Vice President Cashman. And I vote yes, so it passes unanimously. And let's go ahead then and do approval of, at the request of Board Member Price, let's do the approval of minutes separately. And so does anyone have a question about the minutes? Is that a hand raised, or?
No, I'd just like to make a motion.
Yes, Ms. Price.
I did want to point out that I did watch these,
Okay.
but I don't think that qualifies right now for me to be able to
That
vote.
must have put you to sleep. Okay. Okay, so, no, I understand. Yes, you're making a motion, Mr. Garcia. I'll go ahead and second it. And any discussion, Ms. Noble?
Just that at least on May 29th, my name is misspelled once or twice.
On May 29th? I'm sorry, we didn't catch that. I don't do that.
The virtue, not the prize.
I'm sorry, the virtue, not the what? Oh, right,
It's
got
not
it.
like Nobel.
Right. It's Noble, not Nobel. No, I got it. Well, and since we're on that, I don't really make a big deal of it, but since it's in writing, I'm Stephen, not Steve. Okay, so let's go ahead and, there's been a motion and a second, additional?
After 5 years, I'm finding this out?
Well, I mean, when we talk with one another, we're, you know, I'm Steve, you're Lorraine, but when it's in the stuff like that, it's
So just to
Stephen.
clarify, when in the minutes, I'm not knowing what side you're looking at, they're talking about who's here, but if someone refers to you as Steve and they're getting the minutes down, do we write down what they said?
It's just, yeah, you write down what they said, but I'm Stephen when it's written and
Formal,
signed.
like
And
you're-
yeah, formal.
Right.
Formal like. Okay, all those in initial conversation? Yes, Ms. Noble?
I just want to say, I think that the minutes from May 29th are very good, and it was an all
Thank you.
over the place discussion, and I appreciate them.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve the 3 minutes? Aye.
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 Opposed? None opposed?
Abstain.
And abstention from Ms. Price because she wasn't physically present at those meetings but did watch. All right, next item, board update follow-up. Any board update or follow-up for this evening? Hearing none. Next item is item 9, superintendent update and follow-up. None. Holy smokes. No, I don't think I'll ever break your record, Ms. Price. Okay, so next item is presentation, discussion, possible action. First item is the digital learning update, 10A, and Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I will have Dr. Ryan introduce the next presentation.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, we're going to present on the status of our current digital learning plan. We're in the process of creating phase 2, which will be where we're going towards in the future. Neil Weaver is our Director of Digital Learning and will be taking us through the presentation.
Terrific, and for to be expeditious in the presentations, we'll be taking questions at the end, and just go ahead and make a note of what slide your concern or question is about, and then we'll address all of that at the end. Please.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, President Carrillo, Superintendent, members of the board, audience. My name is Neil Weaver. I'm the Director of Digital Learning for Santa Fe Public Schools, and I'm going to take you through a quick update of the digital learning plan and the education technology note over the past few years. Just taking a look back, our network and our classroom conditions around technology were rather antiquated. Even up to four years ago, we had schools that still had chalkboards in them. And so as we were looking towards what our needs were around digital learning, the district put together this digital learning plan that you're all familiar with. It's a 5-year plan, and it focuses on 3 primary areas. The first is building out the infrastructure. The second is providing state-of-the-art equipment in our classrooms to our teachers and our students. And the last is around support and professional development that helps to ensure that we are using these devices and resources with efficacy. So the first, infrastructure, we've really just created a network that is more responsive to our increasing educational needs. Some of the ways that we can see this is the installation of a secondary internet circuit at Alta Vista, and then some of the tools that are listed, such as iBoss, which is our network filtering, Firewall, which just makes sure our network remains safe. We are 83% complete upgrading all of the infrastructure at our schools. We have 3 more school projects going on this summer. We'll talk about that in just a couple more slides. And then all of our schools are one-to-one ready, meaning that every student could be on a wireless mobile device, and they will perform as expected. The next phase was classroom equipment and student devices, and this really focused around ensuring that we have state-of-the-art updated equipment in every one of our classrooms. It included interactive whiteboards, document cameras, teacher laptops, upgrading all of our school computer labs, student device carts that are shared among classrooms, and then of course our one-to-one take-home program for all students in grades 7+. Support and professional development, in my opinion, remains the kingpin of this program. We have scaled our digital learning coach program, as you can see, from 3 digital learning coaches in the 14-15 school year all the way up to 16 currently, and expanding to 17 digital learning coaches next year. And I've listed what our digital learning coaches do and provide, the support they provide to our staff, but I can't stress enough the importance of these digital learning coaches to helping our teachers and our students learn to use digital resources. Support and professional development. We have reorganized the support that we're providing to our schools. Some of the metrics that have come out of this recently: 97% customer satisfaction, and these are through our help desk tickets, the randomized surveys. I have a statistic of 24-cent annual Chromebook repair cost. That has changed. That number changes often as we continue to do repairs. I presented to the audit committee about 2 weeks ago, and at that time 24 cents was a correct number. We're closer to just under $5 per Chromebook, and we knew that it would spike at the end of the year as we get into the Chromebook carts within the schools and find broken devices, et cetera. It seems like a large jump from 24 cents to $5, just under $5, but that's still less than 2% breakage rate, which is nearly unheard of. And last metric up there is just that we close roughly 22,000 tickets per year to support our staff and students. Next slide is just to really point out that we have completed what was promised. There is one small caveat. Before we get to the caveat, I will point out that our one-to-one device rollout was completed a full year early. The schools listed on the very bottom right: Aspen, El Dorado, Gonzales, Carlos Gilbert, Amy Beal, and Sweeney should have been getting their one-to-one devices in August, and we were in August of 2018, sorry, and we were able to do that last August in 2017. That's okay, I'll get to the correct slide, thank you. The one caveat is that EJ Martinez and Chaparral, while we have updated the wireless on those 2 schools, we have not updated the PON, the infrastructure, just because we're waiting a facilities direction on what will become of those buildings. Moving forward, the next 2 slides are just a summary of the board-approved budget. There are 2 slides. And then now for the fun stuff, what this is all really doing for our students. The number on the top right, 86% better prepared. This is from a survey that was conducted of our grade 7+ students. So 86% of our students say that they feel that they are better prepared to work with technology because of this program. We also can see that 58% of our students are using their technology devices to do homework, and that's at least 2 times per week. 96% daily use, those are for our one-to-one devices. So we have the ability to track logins on our network, and we can see that 96% of our one-to-one devices are being used on a daily basis. 115,000 website visits, that's a daily average number. And all these numbers are from metrics that we're collecting on a regular basis. The other thing that the digital learning plan and education technology note have provided is really expanded opportunity for Santa Fe Public Schools. So prior to the digital learning plan, Santa Fe Public Schools was not taking advantage of federal E-rate funds. The Quintero Project, which you all have heard about, is one of those such projects. We are able to increase our network bandwidth by 10-fold and decrease our cost for that bandwidth by 1/5 per year. And the cost of this project is quite minimal to the school district. I believe it's of the $4 million total, roughly, the $4 million total cost, the district will pay for 2% of that. Excuse me. The next expanded opportunity was the Google Rolling Study Hall. That was it's a partnership between Santa Fe Public Schools, Google, and the Consortium for School Networking. And this is just an example of another opportunity that has come to Santa Fe Public Schools. It provides internet to select buses, and in addition to the internet, it provides direct support through tutors that will ride the bus, and that's being paid for by Google. In addition, we're looking at the next steps. So as we focus on what the digital learning plan will look like in the years to come, we're just looking at expanding our access to digital resources for our students and our staff, and really it's about continuing the support that we have already set up. You know, we're looking at different digital resources and digital tools such as adaptive learning and programs that we can begin to use to help our students learn more effectively. And when it comes down to it, really what we're looking at is, this picture is a perfect example, having engaged students who are excited about their learning. And we're really starting to see that we're having pockets of innovation, and we'd like to start to develop this innovation into schools of innovation. The other thing I'd like to point out is that our reach is just not to Santa Fe Public Schools. We have a regional and a national reach among the digital learning coaches and our technology department. Dr. Ryan is the president of the Consortium for School Networking. Felicia Maestas, who is one of my digital learning coaches, is the president of the New Mexico Society for Technology and Integration. I'm sorry, New Mexico Society for Technology in Education. Leslie Clark and Kate Gomez also take part in technology programs around the state. Kate Gomez, I believe, is Kate Gomez is a co-founder or a co-chair, sorry, of the STEM for Girls program, which brought, I think, 285 girls to Santa Fe this past, middle school girls from around New Mexico. And I am actively engaged in a CETL program, which is Certified Education Technology Leaders, helping other technology leaders within the state become CETL certified. The other thing that I'll tell you is that Felicia, Leslie, Kate, and myself are all CETL certified, which is it's quite an honor and a very rigorous coursework that helps us to understand the educational needs around technology. And so just really to wrap this up, the highlights is that we are on time and we are remaining within budget with this program. Are there any questions?
Ms. Price and then Mr. Garcia.
On page 8, which is not marked as 8, looks like this.
Yes, ma'am.
Why are some schools underlined in red?
This was a sorry, Board Member Price, Superintendent, and members of the board. This was just simply a screen capture, and the spelling program felt that they were misspelled.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. It has no other significance.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes, Mr. President. On page number 7, the 97 customer satisfaction, who's the customer? Is it the students? Is it the parents, the teachers?
Board Member Garcia, members of the board, Superintendent, good question. At this point, the customers are primarily Santa Fe Public Schools teachers, administrators, other staff. As we move forward and as we have the one-to-one program, we will begin to provide help desk support to students who need it around their devices as well. So they will additionally become our help desk customers.
On that point, Mr. President. So in response, if you notice, this is about support and professional development. So this particular survey was geared towards staff. Did they feel the professional development was appropriate? Did they feel that, you know, the Chromebook cost was appropriate? And then the tickets that we got. So I think it's really geared to what we were providing. And as Mr. Niels Weaver said, we will follow up later as appropriate with, you know, staff and, I'm sorry, with perhaps parents and age appropriate for students.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And these are continued surveys.
So we're actually, you said that we're actually almost at a one-to-one for Chromebooks for a student. So what happens when the Chromebooks expire? What's the district's plan to actually, after the Chromebook is actually outdated? Where are we going next?
Board Member Garcia, Superintendent, members of the board, we have a refresh cycle that is put in place for all of our devices, not just Chromebooks. But to answer your question directly, we intend for our Chromebooks to last around 4 years. As they expire, as they need to be refreshed, we will purchase new devices.
But of course, at some point, on that point, Mr. President,
Yes.
we'd have to go to the, you know, back to EPAN, back to the voters.
Good. And so you also mentioned you closed 22,000 tickets, more or less. So does that mean we won't have that many tickets looking into the future?
Board Member Garcia, Superintendent, members of the board, this is an average annual number of tickets. It continues to, our average increases every year as we have more devices. We'll have more support needs, therefore more tickets will be closed every year.
So, Mr. President, probably about 5 years ago, I asked my cousin's little boy how he liked the smartboard at Gonzales, and he said, "We don't know because we don't use it." And I said, "What do you mean you don't use it?" He said, "Well, because our educator, our teacher doesn't know how to utilize that." So where is the district at in preparing or assisting these educators that don't know how to use the smartboard? Are they there? Are they not there?
Yeah, great question. Board Member Garcia, Superintendent, members of the board, we have a deliberate professional development plan that has been implemented over the past 4 years. We broke the schools up into cohorts, as you can see on this slide. Each of those cohorts went through a 4-day process of professional development. 2 days were prior to school starting, 1 day in the middle of school, and 1 day towards the, it was actually the beginning of the next school year. One of the issues that we realize is that as we moved from 2014 to 2015 and then on, we hire new teachers. And so the digital learning coaches within the schools are really the, they're really the feet on the ground, if you will, that can help to prepare teachers and especially new teachers to use the technology in the classroom.
So the digital learning teachers, so how many do we have? And so as we get everybody educated on the devices, so we will have less and less digital learning educators, teachers?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, that is incorrect. As you can see on the slide behind you, we have scaled every year. We will increase that number again this coming school year. And what we have found as a national best practice is that you do not have to, you should not take away that support, because the types of support that are needed as we move further and further down this road of learning with digital resources, the types of support change, but they do not go away.
Just a couple other more questions, Mr. President. On the Quintero contract, is that the contract where we received a grant to put fiber in the ground? And if so, where is that project at and when is it starting and completion date?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, that is a great question. The Quintero Project was funded by federal E-rate funds. It has started, and it is on schedule.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, the process of getting all of the right-of-way through the city has been a long process that just finished getting approval. I think it was last week, and now they're starting the preliminary work to get the construction going. There's a timeline that we have published that'll take that ends July 2019 for the completion of that project.
And I have a few questions too, but on this one, I was going to say, and that slide is significant. I took a photo of it and sent it to folks at the city of the 1/5 the cost. And actually, it's my understanding that the Quintero Project and the E-rate funding was part of the reason that the city worked quite hard to get 5 franchise agreements for broadband done quite recently, and this was seen as a big achievement in economic development. It's sort of not the sexy but very important work, because when franchise agreements go in place, then the work can be done. And so I want to compliment staff on this and also draw the connectivity, pun intended, I guess, to the importance of broadband in the community. Quintero will wholesale service in this community and should improve broadband throughout Santa Fe. And the franchise agreements, which is honestly a leap ahead in terms of what we've had before, are very significant, including the one for Quintero as well as 4 others.
In regards to the Google grant that we received for the buses, when is that program starting, and what buses or what routes are actually getting chosen for what schools?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, the project has already started. We have equipment on 6 buses that serve Milagro Middle School students, and we will, at the beginning of next school year, employ tutors to ride those buses.
I would really like the district to actually look into some of the students that actually possibly come from Cerrillos, Madrid. Is Milagro? Okay, good.
You want to talk about the application process and how the schools were selected? Because the grant is done. So, I mean, I can't expand it. If this goes well and we get to apply again, we can. But do you want to explain that, please, Dr. Ryan?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, the specific criteria for the grant was middle school, and then for students that were riding on the bus for 30 minutes or longer, so they could take advantage of that time to have it, that they could settle them down and get them into some type of tutoring with the school. We focused our application on math, specifically on improving math achievement, and the ability for us to expand it to other schools isn't there. Our hope is that we can prove success with this program as we collect data on the progress of kids in their math, and be able to justify expanding the program to other schools and other grades. But at this point, the grant is only for 6 buses. Milagro Middle School was chosen because of the distance they had to travel.
So all of those buses are from Milagro? The 6 buses?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Cashman, then Ms. Noble.
On slide number 8, which says mission complete, and we have E.J. Martinez and Chaparral, and I know that they have not had the pond infrastructure, but a question is that affecting their educational outcomes because the pond is not installed?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, we do not believe it is, no. We have, those schools have a 1-to-1 ready wireless system, and they do have upgraded Cat 6. So at their current use scenario, we believe that they are, that they will operate well.
Assessments
Ms. Noble?
And so just to clarify, that was one of my questions as well. Operations, we don't think are inhibited by not having the PON upgrade.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, that is correct. We do not feel. We have, we perform regular network stress tests. We know that from experience, standardized testing is not affected. We do not hear complaints from the schools that wireless or the network is ineffective.
Thank you.
To add to that, it takes us more to maintain those environments because they're not up to the PON capacity, but investing a lot of money in them when there's a state of flux would not be in the best interest of the district. As we use more and more digital resources in instruction and assessment, that will become more and more difficult down the road. At this point, we have invested in making sure they have the capacity to do their online assessments and the other network capacity needs that are being taken care of.
Mm-hmm. The survey noted on slide 11, 86% felt better prepared, that sort of thing. Was that done at the end of this school year recently? When was the survey?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, that was taken from mid-year data.
Okay. And I think this is really excellent stuff. I saw the presentation at the audit committee as well, and I just wonder, Mr. Weaver, if you remember, there were some pretty excellent questions and comments from the audit committee as to some of the things that were brought up there for the board to hear.
Certainly. President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, I think one of the most poignant questions was about how do we measure our success, and it was around student device use, it was around our digital learning coach program, et cetera. You know, some of the factors that we discussed at the audit committee were that with our digital learning coach program, we survey staff, we survey administrators about their digital learning coaches. We evaluate through observation how the digital learning coaches are impacting. I asked the digital learning coaches to reflect upon their work, so I'll ask, you know, what have you been working on in your schools as a self-reflection? How is it going, and how will you move in the next few months to better impact student learning or teacher use of technology? Also around devices, we talked about our ability to filter student internet access, student connectivity, both on campus and off campus. Our filter works so that all traffic is routed back to our district filter, so that even when students are using our devices at home, their traffic is filtered from inappropriate content. That's a federal requirement through E-rate and through the SIPA agreement of, I believe it's 2000. Sorry.
Thank you. And I do recall a lot of the discussion centering around the digital learning coaches. And Mr. Weaver, you had a wonderful phrase that they were sort of the heart of this program. And there was a lot about the evaluation of the digital learning coaches, which I was quite impressed with how that's done. And I just, you know, there's a lot in this presentation. In a way, it's a shame we don't have press here, because this is an incredible story to tell about how we're leading the way, and I compliment you, Dr. Ryan and Mr. Weaver, on your work here. But truly, for us to, you know, have our schools done a year ahead of schedule, have scaled up the digital learning coaches, and of course that's a hugely important part about how technology actually works in the schools, because these are all certified teachers, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
And they are helping our teachers figure out how, you know, if you can take a walk down a street in China through technology now, and you can do all sorts of things that we couldn't imagine a long time ago, but those relationships matter, and the individual ideation, brainstorming about how to apply technology in any of the given lessons, as well as what's happened with Quintero and E-rate, and Mr. Weaver, you said sort of at the end about adaptive learning, and I see that that's a very important thing. My son has a device that he works with every so often at Gonzales, or did this year, that would give him harder and harder math problems, I believe, when he got them right. So he was able to advance his math through the use of this device, and it allows us, this technology, you know, our students in many ways are way ahead of us in terms of the use of technology, but it allows this differentiation in instruction that, in my view, will be very important as we go forward. And so I'm just really glad we're telling this story, that we've done the ETN. The other thing to say is that the digital learning coaches are all paid through the ETN, correct?
That is correct.
So, you know, we have a distinct area of funding for this, but I think we have done a huge amount of work, and we will really start to see it bear more and more fruit for our students and the learning opportunities as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Dr. Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo, members of the board. First of all, you know, the previous administration that started this and the board, you know, they get a lot of credit for their forward thinking. But I also want to say that when we met Ms. Sink, Dr. Ryan, a team of us looking at how we were going to start improving student achievement, one of the things that we were very aware of was that our kids sometimes were having to take the test and didn't have the PARC, but yet did not have access to the Chromebooks, or they were going to be taking it on a touchscreen or not, and they hadn't been on a PC, you know, all this disconnect. And so we talked to the team and said, well, can they accelerate this? And they stepped up to the plate and they got it done, which I was very impressed, because we weren't really scaled up to do that yet. And they accelerated to ensure that our kids, more kids, were on equal footing. The second thing that I'm very pleased of where we're going next year is more integration with Ms. Sink and Dr. Ryan's team. You talked about the digital coaches, but they really are instructional coaches. It's sort of like saying, well, they're chalkboard coaches. I mean, it's a tool. And so how are we better integrating the instructional coaches with the digital coaches so that we're really improving instruction? And so you'll see a lot more of, they started that alignment this year, but next year we're going to see more alignment, more integration, and hopefully more support to our principals and our teachers. So, you know, we're looking forward to where we go as we continue to evolve and grow this program. But thank you very much for your hard work.
And then me, and then Rudy. Page 6, slide 6, please. And this actually addresses or compounds, if you will, what Rudy said. It was you, Rudy, right, who said that your nephew or something, how do you like the whiteboard? And he said we never use it. Okay. So what steps do we have on the accountability side? So, for instance, principals making sure that teachers are using the technology that we're providing, that they're learning it, and that they're integrating it into study, that digital learning coaches are held accountable. So if they know that a teacher is not, or not adapting, not learning, resistant, how are they held accountable in their reporting to a principal? Because there's no sense in our spending all this money, especially out of the ETN, on the coaches, if there are people within the district that are not willing to come into the 21st century with us. So what steps, measurements are taking for all three? Digital learning coaches, teachers, and principals, to make sure that people are on board and doing what they're supposed to be.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, I'll start off. The point of the digital learning coaches is not necessarily to integrate technology, it's to improve teaching and learning, leveraging technology to get there, and there's a difference. Instead of them being separate from instruction and only focusing on the technology stuff and our people using the technology, we're really looking at an integrated approach. All of the digital learning coaches are going to all the instructional coach sessions because they're teachers and instructional coaches. We are monitoring, as Neil said, they're coming back, they have a weekly log. We check when they log in at school to make sure they're at the sites. We follow up on the types of tickets that are coming in for need. We are we have applications that we're looking at how often are applications used. Next year we'll be able to tell whether those applications are used in school and then after school, so how are teachers using these resources. We monitor the number of licenses for the applications that we have to determine if teachers and principals are actually using those tools so that we can come back and determine what is it that we need to do. Do we need to provide more professional development, or is this an application we shouldn't be using anymore? So we evaluate their use by the number of licenses that are being used. And instead of just providing a presentation, say, on a whiteboard, now we're looking at providing a presentation on reading or math or science or common core skills with Ms. Sink's team, and then using the technology to help us to get there, so there's not two sessions of that we have to pull teachers out, but that we have one integrated, focused on instruction, leveraging technology to get there and examining that. Did I miss anything? Hopefully that answered your question.
And this would be for Dr. Garcia, because ultimately the principals are in charge of their buildings and in charge of all their teachers. So what are, what accountability measures, because it really does disturb me, and I'm sure that out there somewhere, there are still teachers who are not on board with the program. So what on the principal side is being done to hold them accountable for their
So
buildings
Ms.
and
Sink
teachers?
is making her way because her shop supervises the principals directly.
Board Member Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, I would liken this to my discussion that I had with you around the Lanel science kits, that it does take a team at the school, the leadership team at the school, to make sure we're using those kits. In the New Mexico Teach Evaluation System, there's a domain that includes the technology portion of it, and so when the principals are evaluating their teachers, that's on their evaluation. They evaluate 2 to 3 times per year. So I have actually got a couple of friends that didn't make the perfect 5 because of technology, and they were very upset about it. And it actually made them start going to some more of the PD during the summer. So I think if teachers also care about their evaluation, that helps. You know, the principal can't pound them over the head, but definitely that can be affected in their evaluation. I think the more important thing is that we keep pushing and pushing on in a very positive way around the PD, as Tom mentioned. That's our way of doing it, is just keep at it. And I think it's finally, most of all, I think the principals would tell you this too. What I found as a principal, teachers are afraid of it many times, and it just takes a while for them to get used to it. So I think that's more it than anything.
Great, thank you very much.
I'll tell you though,
yeah.
the ones that are using it, some of the things that those boards can do and the way that the teachers utilize it, and how they're also like tracking data and, I mean, doing all kinds of things that they can show their students in the class. I mean, I'm very impressed with the advancements of where even whiteboards have come through over time, right? I mean, it's really quite amazing, the capacity of those. And hopefully through the professional development, they continue to grow, but it is really impressive.
Next, the ETN. When is the next ETN vote to the public? I just can't remember. I know it's...
Yeah, the vote was supposed to be this February, coming up, and with the change in legislation, that is not necessarily an option, so it's there. We're going to have to go to
November 2019 then?
Well, November, although there'll be a gap that will be, that has to be covered between February and November. We can't wait to November. There's expenses that will continue. So there's other options that legal is looking at to be able to cover that gap between we're in the February to November election period.
Well, and there's another piece that we're looking at also in terms of legal, Mr. Carrillo, members of the board, and that is whether or not you'd want to do a paper election and what that would cost, you know, because we'd have to pay for it, a mail-in ballot. And so that is another option. And then, of course, I think, but you already have a policy, the board can just levy the tax, too,
Right.
without going to.
But there wouldn't be an increase in this case.
I don't believe so.
It would be this, correct?
There would be no increase.
So it could be by board decision to save the district money, or it could, we'd have to find a gap
I think
between
you'd have to
February
change your-
2019.
You'd have to change your policy.
Okay, but what I'm hearing is right now, it's, had the legislature not made that mess of things, it would have been February 2019, but now it's November 2019. And because we were thinking it was going to be February, we have to find a way to fill that 9-month expense gap.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. It was Mr. Garcia, is it on this point? Ms. Cashman on this
Yeah.
point, and then Mr. Garcia?
And hopefully, we're going to get more guidance at the law conference this week on it. But we're going to have that same gap in all of our elections now for our mill levy, our SB 9, and our GO bond. So I'm sure that all the districts are going to be talking, what do we do?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Garcia?
So this is one aspect of the schools, is actually, we talked about improving the instruction of this area. And so I would like to, I know where we're going, and I'd like to know where we have been, just to see the increase, hopefully, in education throughout the students. So somehow, if you can actually explain, you don't have to do it now, but.
Well, it's in the,
Well, the superintendent actually admitted that she said that the previous administration had started this. So
Oh.
we're actually going in a better direction now, and we're at where we should be at. But I would like to know how much of an increase in this improving instruction have we actually gained?
well, heck, Lorraine and I could tell you where we've been, right? Because this was, we were the only two. And Representative Trujillo, when the ETN came to us, and nobody else was doing this, and it came to us and said, look, if you guys, I mean, you're being left behind, and really severely, as it was presented to us. And so we said, absolutely, this first go-around, we're going to, and I remember what you said this very specifically. If I'm going to take someone's money out of their pocket, I want them to know about it. I want to ask them with their permission, right? Because that very first time, because we had the legislative approval to do so, we did so as a board. We took a little heat for that, and but then it was the right thing to do, and we approved it once more after that, and we have to go back again. So, but where we were, Rudy, we were in the dark ages, chalkboards, and so it was.
Excuse me, I taught with a chalkboard.
The what? I know, and we can still. I mean, there's all. Let's face it, all over the country, people are in little red schoolhouses using chalkboards. I mean, it's all about having a great teacher, right? But this way, our kids are having the tools, and I'm using the word correctly, literally, Rudy. Literally, we were in the our kids did not have the technology they needed, and neither did our teachers or even the district to manage data. So that's where we were.
Thank you. And then also, just for the record, keep in mind at West Point, they still actually do teach on chalkboards.
Okay, so noted. Any other comments on the presentation or questions? Thank you. Thank you for that it was concise. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is the student dress code. And I want to thank all the students that came this evening to speak of there's not a one to speak on the issue.
And I'm going to ask the
School's out. There's no
principals.
way they're coming to a school board meeting. So the next item, Dr. Garcia.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask the principals if they'd move to that side so you're close to the mic in case, you know, there's a question for you or there's something that you want to share. Sue O'Brien is very sad that she could not be here tonight because she spearheaded this work and then I just got to come in on the tail end and do a little editing and work with staff, but she did the heavy lift with the committee. This is, the board asked for this, and I'll tell you just a quick refresher. I think quite, it was poignant and it was right on target. I think we had some female students that came and talked to us about the inequity and the sexism in the dress code and enforcement. And one of the things that I had talked to Sue about, having been a high school principal myself, is the time that is wasted measuring a couple of inches here and a couple of inches there, and also keeping in mind the developmental stages of teenagehood in particular, which is differentiation. And the more that you tighten the dress code, the more you push kids to do radical things like shave eyebrows and pierce body parts and dye their hair weird colors and shave their head. You know, because it's a natural stage of development. And what we try to do on this dress code was to focus on behavior more so than on the clothing, but yet not have it disrupt instruction. So the first pages you can skip. I'm not going to go over them. It's just on the policy.
Okay, on this as well, we'll take questions at the end, and just please write down the slide.
So I'd like to go to slide 5, which, well, I guess we should go to 4 real quick. On the policy, just so that you're aware of, coaches and sponsors of extracurricular activities have authority to establish more stringent rules in for their activities, as long as it's in accordance with the administrative regs. So the basketball team or whatever could have a little stricter code. But as we look at the committee, if you'd go to slide 5, thank you. I'd like to thank Ann Darton, Sue O'Brien, Kate Diaz, Jack Lane, Mark Moots, Josh Ryan, and Felicia Senna. They did a lot of the heavy lift. And then at our All-Star meeting, was it this week or was it last week? Last week. God, it feels like it was just yesterday. I can't keep track of time. Thank you. Which, do I go sideways? Thank you. All right. We wound up spending almost 2 hours talking about it, because while I may have certain biases about this, they're the ones that are implementing it. And so we really wanted to make sure that, we were getting good guidance about what it means when you start doing this. So the guiding principles is that it's equitable, and that, the intent is to ensure health, safety, and the mental well-being of all students. And we're focusing on behavior, and behaviors that undermine the educational process is what we need to be addressing. So I want to get to the meat of this, but Santa Fe Public Schools expects that all students will dress in a way that is appropriate for the school day or for any school-sponsored event. The primary responsibility for attire resides with the student and their parents or the guardian. And the administrators will use reasonableness and have the discretion to determine appropriateness, and they may make special exceptions for students with a documented health or disability, obviously religious reasons, or special days. I know, like, one of the high schools has a pajama day, I think, right? Normally kids don't wear pajamas, but on pajama day, now if somebody came in something that was inappropriate, they would use discretion in that regard. So school staff shall enforce the dress code consistently in a manner that does not reinforce or increase marginalization or oppression of any group based on race, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, cultural observance, household income, body type, or size. Okay, so that right there I think is going to be key. And teachers are empowered to ensure appropriate dress given the variations in their classroom environment. So you're in the middle teaching chemistry and you have Bunsen burner and you're wearing, netting or something crazy, they could say that's not going to work. What we have talked to the staff about, what they suggested was that they will have, like T-shirts or large T-shirts to be able to have kids switch out if that's an issue. We don't want to see kids sent home because of dress. So, let me see, where am I? Page 9. So, here's the first Number 1, certain body parts must be covered for all students at all times. Clothes must be worn in a way such that genitals, buttocks, breasts, navel are fully covered with fabric that you can't see through. It's number 1. A shirt with fabric in the front and the back and on the sides and under the arms. Pants or equivalent, skirts, sweatpants, leggings, or shorts. Shoes, safe and appropriate for weather, course assignments, athletic and other conditions. The high schools, in particular, wanted IDs. This was the one that just took us over the top. We call it hoodies and sweatshirts. And we could not come to consensus on hoodies and sweatshirts. And finally I said, well, the definition of anxiety is anxiety. I'm anxious about this. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So we tried something different. We broke into groups, the K-5s, the K-6, the K-8s, the middle schools, the high schools, and the alternative schools. Once we did that, it seemed to be that it was really a division amongst levels, which I would have never guessed. So K-5, K-6, K-8, and middle school, hoods are not allowed to be worn on students' heads in the building. In the comprehensive high schools and the alternative high schools, hoods are allowed to be worn on students' heads on campus, but in school classrooms only at the discretion of the classroom teacher. There's a lot of discussion about earbuds in the being worn, and that's where, again, the teachers will focus on behavior. If you're not paying attention in class, then we address that. And there's Miss Price with her hoodie. And then hats. Hats, K-5, K-6, K-8, and middle school. Hats are allowed to be worn on students' heads on campus, including in school classrooms, which I was, interested in, but this is what they felt they would rather deal with. In comprehensive high schools and alternative high schools, hats are allowed to be worn on students' heads on campus, but in school classrooms only at the discretion of the classroom teacher. And then sunglasses are not allowed indoors and only allowed outdoors. Students cannot wear the following clothing or accessories: offensive language, including profanity, hate speech, pornography, misandry, or misogyny, or that denote, suggest, display, or reference alcohol, drugs, or related paraphernalia, or other illegal conduct or activities. And then they cannot wear anything that would interfere with the operation of the school, disrupt the educational process, invade the rights of others, or create a reasonably foreseeable risk of such interference or invasion. Reasonably can be construed as being or including content that is racist, lewd, vulgar, or obscene. Reasonably can be construed as containing fighting words, speech that incites others to imminent lawless action, defamatory speech, or threats to others. That reasonably, that reveal visible undergarment, that could be considered dangerous or could be used as weapons, and conceal the face except as religious observance. There was a lot of discussion about, should we say bra strap or that girl's lair, and again it was common sense that they decided they didn't want to get into defining, is it a camisole, is it, because sometimes all of that can be combined, the way that undergarments go or lingerie goes. And so again, is it focusing back on the behavior, is it disrupting the educational process? We also had felt that this policy is going to also probably cause some really interesting discussion that I think is of educational value. So staff will enforce the code respectfully and consistently, using the requirements. No student shall be denied attendance at school for failing to abide the dress code. Students will only be removed from spaces, hallways, or classroom as a result of code violation. If students are in violation of section 1 and 4, so we'd have to go back to that, or in violation of section 1 and 4, will be provided 3 options to be dressed more to code during the school day or at a school-sponsored activity. And then students will be asked to put on their own alternative clothing if already available. Students will be provided with temporary school clothing when available. If necessary, students, parents, and guardians may be called during the day to bring alternative clothing. So next steps, we need to broadly communicate with internal and external stakeholders ASAP. so beginning tomorrow, and then review of implementation at the end of the first 9 weeks. And what we're looking at is dress code forcing a deeper dive into focusing on behavior, and is our dress code currently allowing for disruption of the educational process. The biggest change was at the elementary level, where that we had standard dress. But what we found from talking to folks is that standard dress had really eroded. It, you know, there were so many exceptions, and that it really was not doing, you know, what we thought it would do. I think at the time that we even started standard dress, and you might remember Ms. Price when I was here, was there was a lot more focus on a lot more gang issues, and that was one. And the other was thinking that it might be more cost effective for families to have uniforms. I've thus been educated by staff that, in fact, it is easier for some families who don't have the means to go to Goodwill and buy a 50-cent t-shirt or find, you know, clothing versus doing the standard dress. So we'll see how this progresses. If after a year it's anarchy and, you know, horrible, then, you know, we'll look at changing it. According to policy, we're to review this every year anyway. And with that, I would, if any of the principals have anything they want to add, or Linda, if they're, Ms. Sink, if you have anything that you think we should add, you guys have anything you want to say? Okay, go ahead. Questions, or do you want to make a comment before we go to questions? Come to the podium, Ms. Diaz.
All right, President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia.
And I'm sorry, Katie, even though we all know who you are, you have to state your name for the
Kate
record.
Kate Diaz, principal at Atalaya Community or Elementary School. I think there may have been one little typo in the presentation. I think the elementary K-8s and middle schools were okay with hats on in the building, but not necessarily in the classroom. So I think there's a little error.
So we can fix that. So the
just
K-8s,
to clarify,
K-8s were with hats. Slide 12. Hats. Say that again.
I believe that they were allowed to wear hats in the building, but not in the classrooms necessarily. I mean, if teachers would allow, that would be okay, but mostly not in the classroom to
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of questions, we're going to go Steve, then Rudy, then Ms. Price, then, okay, Rudy, Lorraine, Kate, and, okay. So, getting rid of standard dress. Yes. Done. Okay. So, slide 15. Reveal visible undergarment is the main thing. And I really wish Ramona Parks were here. Ramona, of course, who gave the best salutatorian speech, I think, in the history of salutatorian speeches. If there was a Mark Twain Award, she would have received it. So, teacher says, you know, I'm really, let's say someone's wearing, you know, a tasteful off-shoulder top, so you can see two straps. Totally tasteful, right? Teacher says, you know, I really think, miss, that your outfit is very distracting to the guys on the other side of the room. I mean, this is the whole thing. One of the things Ramona touched on was, you know, it's not my fault that you can't control your urges.
That was our discussion that we had, and I think we have unanimity, particularly this is an issue at high school and middle school, but they're going to be focusing on behavior. It's not the girl's fault if a boy is distracted, and we're not going to be going there, which is why we are kind of on the visible undergarment. I think what they're really looking at is like your shorts or, you know, your briefs, right? And then I guess if in fact you literally could see breasts or whatnot, right? And I don't know if the guys want to talk about it. The high school, I know that we had quite a bit of discussion about this and decided that we're going back to focusing on behavior. So if a student's minding her own business and doing her thing and you can't see her breasts, we're not going to deal with it.
Right, and Carl Morano, principal at Santa Fe High School, President Carrillo, members of the board, and Dr. Garcia. So it came up, and of course off of Ramona's speech as well. So I think for us, really beginning the school year with our professional development with our staff, and really emphasizing what we are going to, how we are going to enforce this, actually going through some scenarios, and also having maybe even some students come in and do kind of a little fashion dress code for our staff to say this is what we're gonna, what we're gonna enforce and what we're not gonna enforce. So one of the things that we like about this, especially at the high school level, is it's a struggle every day. And 1,400 students, there might be a student that goes all day without being corrected, and then we got the one student we asked to cover up, and we get a phone call from mom, and we get a phone call from, so I think the consistency, this gives us a lot more consistency in allowing us to enforce. We used to have the length, I think Dr. Garcia brought it up in our professional development the other day, is remember the length of the shirts and the skirt. If I have short arms, I can wear a shorter skirt, right? If I had long arms, I couldn't get away with it, and it got to be where we were dealing with that all day. We want to be more visible in the classrooms. We want to concentrate on teaching and learning, and again, put it on the teachers. If there is a boy making inappropriate comments or a girl making inappropriate comments, that's handled in the classroom as behavior, right? Regardless of what someone is wearing, that is always the case. So, so at the high schools, we really appreciate the fact that we can, again, it'll be up to us as principals to emphasize to the staff what we want to enforce and go through some of the things you just said, President Carrillo, as far as scenarios and what if a girl's wearing this, what if a boy's wearing this, and being consistent across the school, I think is going to be important. So.
I think in PD, the consistency piece for teachers is going to be the most challenging thing, because that's something that Ramona had even commented on in an article in the New Mexican. And the other thing about PD is I would ask the superintendent to what is body shaming, so that everyone that works for the district understands what that is and how it makes people feel and things of that nature. 13 on 12, hats. So I'd be curious for elementary middles, if we're not allowing, I mean, this is, hats off, no pun intended, hats off to you for the challenge. Because kids want to wear ball caps with their favorite team. And if they're in 7th grade, they want to wear their Broncos hat, right? Not their Cowboys hat, mind you, but their Broncos hat. Patriots, right. Anyway, so how that's handled. I'm curious when we revisit this after the first 9 weeks. The other thing, so on the alcohol thing, page 13, so this would include then, as I'm reading it, if somebody wore a T-shirt that had a Jack Daniels logo, or a T-shirt that had Santa Fe Brewing, or a hat that had Santa Fe Brewing, or anything related, and I mean, it's a great brewery, that's why I said 2nd Street, give them some credit also. So that includes all of that, right? Okay, wow, okay. Rudy just brought up a really good point. What about if somebody's wearing a T-shirt that has a marijuana plant?
Drugs or related paraphernalia.
But it's legal, but it's not legal here yet.
Yeah, but it's not for their age.
And
Alcohol is legal.
It's
but
just fascinating. The
underage.
whole issue of dress code is just so fascinating. All right, that's the main thing. I was really curious about the body shaming and how you handled the person with the tasteful top and the bra strap.
Also, if you looked at, I forget what page it was on, Mr. President, where it said also body type and size, because I know that sometimes some people, because of their size, get I'm going to say harassed, but disciplined more so than maybe someone who was smaller in size.
I just think they get harassed differently, but basically when young women get harassed by young boys, regardless of, just in general. So that's all I have right now. So Rudy, then Lorraine.
I would prefer to be called School Board Member Price.
Okay.
Or Ms. Price.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So Mr. Garcia and then Ms. Price.
First of all, principals, thank you for everything that you guys do for the schools, because this is probably the first time I see everybody in an area. Thank you for what you guys do, because you guys are on the front lines. We realize that. So thank you for what you do. Also, sitting down and collaborating about this and figuring out what was the best thing for you guys to actually to enforce. I really appreciate that you guys actually sat down together and whatever you guys want to enforce. And I totally have your guys' back, because like I said, you guys see this every single day. Yes, there was one student that actually did a very good job up there speaking. That is one student's opinion that she actually got up there and spoke about. So thank you once again for what you do. In regards to the training that Principal Moreno brought up, I think that's actually a good idea. That's something that the state legislature is actually doing now. Before you actually go get a job there, whether you're admin staff or in the mailroom, so on and so forth, they actually have some sort of a video up there that actually shows you what to wear, what not to wear, what you can do, and cannot do. So that's actually a very good idea. In regards to the hats, can you just have your hat on, or can you wear it sideways? Can you wear it backwards, or that's just a case-by-case basis?
Original, if I may, Mr. President, the original task force had it like you could wear it front, but you couldn't wear it to the side, okay, because it might be gang related. We didn't even want to get into gang relation work. We're focusing on behavior, because you can switch the hat and say you can't wear the hat, and then the kids put a red string around their wrist, or they will do something to identify. Do we encourage kids to be in gangs? No. But what we want when they're on campus is that there's peace, that they're, what might be behavior, might be intimidating other kids, extorting, selling drugs, or fighting. Those are again, we're back to focusing on behaviors, not so much the hat is sideways. It was interesting. I think it was Dr. Sanchez that talked about, I think, if I may just share with them, and if they want to ask you another question, but I know that she shared that when the focus came off of harassing kids with the hats, they actually stopped wearing them. It just the battle just wasn't there. So it actually improved. And then sometimes the clothing can give us clues to what's happening with kids at home. I think one child we found out that the kid was homeless and didn't have clothing, or why they were dressing a certain way. Another fascinating thing was identification. We thought, well, probably high schools won't want hats on campus. And it's like, no, actually, we can identify the kid that always wears the red hat and see them on camera, So, I mean, they're out there dealing with this on a regular basis, and some things that might not be apparently, apparent to us, because we're not on campus all the time, really winds up being a tool that helps support kids.
Thank you.
Ms. Price?
In the section where it says students must wear, how about a dress?
Which page is it on?
I don't have numbers.
The appendix?
Where it says, number 2, it says students must wear,
Oh, the appendix.
And you're suggesting?
that a dress be added to it?
I apologize.
That's
I'm
okay.
still not following you.
Okay,
the
it says a shirt,
Very last page.
pants or equivalent,
Here.
shoes, and IDs. I'm saying we can add a dress. It happens.
Yes,
Is this
a skirt, pants, shoes. I don't know why it didn't have
Dress.
dress, so good catch.
I used to be an English teacher. I catch these things.
We'll have to define dress.
And then,
And they are one.
Ms. Price, anything else on that? Okay, Ms. Noble?
Were students engaged on the development of this?
I need to ask, Sue O'Brien isn't here, so some of you that were on the committee, can you help me with that?
tired of me already. All right, President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia. We did, Suluhan, actually, I know she spent a day at our school with about 20 of our high school students at various grade levels. So it wasn't just our seniors that were leaving. We had members from, student members from each grade level, I know at Capitol High School as well. And I'm not sure, Milagro did. So yes, students were involved in the discussion. She got feedback and input from them and then took it back to the committee.
And they did that survey.
Yes, and then students also filled out a survey questionnaire that went out to, and a lot of our students, especially at the high school level, wanted to complete the survey, so, and parents as well, yeah, and teachers, so, okay.
That's great to hear, thank you. And I also want to just say thank you. I know how much you all have to do and to complete work that is this thorough. On top of all that is really impressive. And I am guessing that our teachers, our principals, and perhaps even most of all our students will be very happy to have a different dress code. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noble and Ms. Cashman.
No, I think it's a good product. I just want you to be consistent. Whatever you enforce, just be consistent, because that's where the problem comes in. So consistency is a big thing. Thank you.
Any other questions for the group? And I would just like to echo what people have said. I know that dress code's just the sticky wicket all of the time. So thank you for all of your efforts and the hard work you put in just in general. Enjoy the parts of the summer that you're able to. And thanks for what you do for our kids. If there's nothing else, yes, Ms. Noble.
I'd move to approve the student dress code with the addition of dress.
It's not an action item.
Oh, it's not an action item?
No, it's just
okay.
a presentation, yeah.
Well, it's possible action.
So let's just do it right away, so you don't have to put it on.
Okay.
Want to just do it right away?
You don't want to do it now?
It's not an action item. This is.
It's under possible action.
Oh, it's under possible,
It says
but it
possible,
doesn't
but that's-
require
yeah.
action of the board.
All right, good. All right, 'cause you just do it.
Thanks all for coming. Have a great night.
Thank you.
And Carl, were you forced to wear a tie tonight? No, he's out there already. I'm just kidding. No, he wears a tie a lot. So action items. You look good. All right, so action items. First item is the first reading of policy 540. And that would be the inclusion of charters in district bonds.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Tonight is first reading of policy 540, inclusion of charter schools and district bonds. This is based on a board request. We did not have a policy for this issue, and we did work with outside counsel, Mr. Art Melendres, that also helped guide this. And so, Ms. Sullivan, would you lead the discussion, please?
Yes, President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, Superintendent Garcia. At the board's request, we specified that only district-chartered charter schools may participate in the GO bond elections. And that's pursuant to statute. This change to the policy would clarify what we are entitled to do under statute. We
So-
took the, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. So basically this, we have this here tonight just to just to codify in policy that only district charters may use GO bond funds.
Correct.
That's why this is here.
Yes.
Okay.
However, it does have a date by
Yeah.
when they have to notify us, even for district charters. So it makes the process very clear
Yeah.
as to how people can qualify.
Okay, so I'm going to first make a motion to, and then we'll do questions, of course. A motion to approve the first reading of policy 540. Is there a second?
Second.
And discussion, Rudy?
Just really quick, so this is actually to follow state statute, correct? Yes, so.
It does follow state statute.
And once again, it's up to the Board of Education to determine whether the charter school gets placed on a general obligation bond, if we wish?
Yes, we were entitled to decide whether to include state chartered charter schools.
Thank you.
Ms. Price?
So then, the charter schools that are not district chartered schools, how do they get general obligation bond elections? Do they do it through the state?
They won't get, President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia and Member Price, they won't get GO bond funding, but they have other avenues for capital outlay. They have a new lease purchase option within statute, and they can apply for 0% interest loans from the New Mexico Finance Authority.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Cashman?
Thank you for getting this policy done, so we have some clarity, but I do want to ask one further issue that this came up when the original question was brought up. Can they ask to be placed on our bond when we go, and I'll use the case of New Mexico School for the Arts. They understood that they could not get our bond, but they also wanted a bond question placed, so we would have gone out and said, do you approve $100 million for Santa Fe Public Schools, and do you approve $15 million? Can they ask to be placed on our bond when we go out, or?
Under my current understanding of the charter school laws, they don't have the individual authority to ask for a GO bond mill levy assessments. They'd have to be included in the district's GO bond election, but they're entitled to participate in the other types of mill levy elections, such as House Bill 33 and Senate Bill 9 and the ETN, but not for GO bond, is my understanding.
So then a follow-up question, would it be better to clarify this policy a little bit more to clearly state that they cannot be asked? I mean, because I know that's what they were asking us.
That was a separate question, and I don't
Okay.
believe that the question was answered, what Ms. Cashman was asking. And it's separate from being included in ours. It's asking to be a part of the election. And I don't know if that question specifically was asked of Mr. Melendres. And so we need to follow up. Do you understand the distinction, Ms. Sullivan?
Yes, I do.
And so that's a good question. I think that we focused on, coming to us to be part of ours, but we did not. And I know that sometimes, just like the community college came to us, you have the option to vote yes or no, that we'll do the election together and save costs. Is that what you're asking, right? So can they be part of the election? Is that what you're asking?
Right, they had asked to have a separate question when we went out and be part of our election. And from what I'm reading here, they're not entitled to go out for GO bond funding. So I think we either need to reword the policy a little bit or just make sure so we're clear when a state charter comes and says, but I would like to be part of your election. We have a policy that says, I'm sorry, but state statute doesn't allow that.
Well, it could. I think it possibly could, right? I think it's really whether, just the same with the community college, if somebody wants to be on your election and share costs, it's really up to the board.
So, so I guess, Ms. Cashman, what I'm asking, I'm perfectly happy not passing this tonight. So is there some reason this has to be done tonight?
No.
First, just yes or no, great. And the second thing is, having sat here, and Ms. Price was here as well, they wanted to be a part not just of the election, but of the ballot question.
And that's what this addresses.
Okay, so are you then saying you don't want them to have that ability? You want us to pass a policy that excludes them from even doing that? Should a board?
Yes, if that's what the state allows us to do, so that they're not sitting there on the same ballot because, I foresee that maybe the voters could pass one bond And so it seems to me that they are not allowed to go out and ask for general obligation bonding. And if that's the case, I want to be very specific in our policy that they cannot be on our ballot.
Well, my understanding from that evening, and even though their attorneys weren't very well prepared, is that they can be a part of our bond. We don't want them to, maybe, but they could. Like, there was the option for them, for there to be 2 ballot questions during our, and if you're not wanting that, then I would say that, or if the board wants to make sure that that's no longer an option, not just for NMSA, but any state charter, then that's something that probably needs to be made clear.
Yeah, it's a separate thing, and I think you said not part of the bond, but I think you meant part of the ballot to be on the election. And so, you know, we can put that language in, I would think. I think the board always has the option to not let other people be a part of our election, just like it's allowed for the community college. You choose to. You vote, yes, we'll do it jointly, or you say, no, we don't want to. So you always have that option, but if you want it clarified, we can put that in. I think it's allowable by law for them to go out.
Excuse me, Superintendent. I guess the problem is if we went out and allowed them, we would be guaranteeing their bond. And that was part of the question from the legal standpoint. It would be against our bond rating that we would have to guarantee their bond. So I'm not sure we're ready to move forward with this until we make sure we understand legally, because that was a concern that they said, no, they couldn't go out and just.
Ms. Price.
What we explained to them is that the average voter might not understand when they went in to vote. We have 2 choices here. Maybe we should go with the one that's cheaper as opposed to the one that's more expensive. The one that was more expensive was ours, of course. Theirs was one school. And we also said that we have schools that are lined up who have needs, and we don't want to jump ahead of the school's needs because we have the CRC who have just spent all of their time deciding, you know, how they're going to bring to us what priorities the school should, that they wanted us to vote on. And that they were asking us then, therefore, to jump ahead of everybody else without knowing it. And the message that was sending to the public. I'm concerned that we're telling people permanently that they can, based on a state statute that I haven't read, okay, that we're going to say from now until some school board decides otherwise, you can't even come and ask us. I think we're a public body, and I think they have the right to come and ask, and we have the right to do what we did the last time and say no.
Mr. Garcia and then Ms. Cashman.
I would tend to agree with Board Member Price because we did actually allow ATC to get $10 million of our last bond whenever we.
They're our charter.
They're
Right.
not a state charter.
Oh, this is just strictly state charter. Oh.
And then to make it more complicated, Mr. President,
Sure.
because they're not even a state charter, they're created through the legislative process. They're neither a state authorized charter, nor they weren't authorized by an entity. They were created by statute, which makes them even an otter duck.
Ms. Cashman.
I guess I still think we haven't answered the legal question. I remember at Art Melendres said to us, I believe, so we need to double check, but if we allowed them, we would have to guarantee their bond because they're not allowed to bond legally. And so, on their own. And so, for me, this policy doesn't address that. If the law has changed, then that's fine, but at that time, he said they are not allowed to go out. So we would be the guarantor of that bond because there's no mechanism. So I think we're a little bit premature in I would just like the policy to be looked at another time.
So just to clarify,
But
Mr.
yes,
President?
But remember, Board Member Cashman, this was a very particular case, because this is the only school in the state that is a state charter that says in their bylaws, I think it is, that they cannot ask. They cannot just go out and get money themselves in this manner. Remember that?
Yes, I do remember that, but until we address, I don't know if the state also, we don't see bonds for state charter schools. So what I'm saying is we still have a legal question to still be asked. Can a state charter school like Turquoise Trail go out and bond? I don't believe they can.
No. So here's what we're going to do.
Okay.
I'm going to withdraw my motion, and we're going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to ask Mr. Melendrez, because what I'm hearing is your concern as to whether or not they can come later, attached to our bond, and you're right, we had to guarantee it, because the state did not set up a mechanism for them. They set up the whole school, but no way for them to pay for it. And that's why they were coming to us at the 11th hour, desperate for that.
To clarify,
So-
Mr. Carrillo, you're saying attached to our bond, but you mean attached to our election?
No, this was attached to our bond.
Okay.
This was, when this happened, they came to us.
I remember.
Yeah, and they wanted,
But isn't
and we
that
had
what
to
you're
guarantee
saying?
it. The attorneys were clear on that. And Linda, you were sitting, yeah, and we would have had to guarantee their $15 million bond. So if they were in any reason to default, it fell onto us.
I get it. I just want to clarify that I think you addressed not being part of our bond, but what's not addressed is allowing them to be a part of our election. And that's the question that we have to get clarified, that they can't be part of the election. Because the language that she addressed here is not allowing them to be part of our bond. That's
But
what she
then
addressed.
Okay, but then I would say Ms. Price's concern is, do we want to say forever and a day that we don't want to allow somebody to be part of our election? I mean, maybe there's going to be a point at which we do want them. So when we have our election in some November, in the same way that SFCC is part of our election, NMSA could also be part of our election and on the ballot, just not on our money.
But I think, and what I want clarity on is what does the state law allow? Because and so that's, if the state law says, if you, Santa Fe Public Schools, want to guarantee that bond, which we would never guarantee another agency's bond, so we still need more legal clarity before I think we're ready for this policy.
So we'll get the legal clarity, but I think they can do both. And the question is going to be, what does the board want to do?
Correct.
And so they'll bring that back to us, and that gives us time to think about it. All right.
Thank you.
So thank you. So that takes care of 540 for tonight. Resolution Open Meetings Act. This is procedural. As I understand it, we do this every year. Dr. Garcia.
Mr. Carrillo, you're absolutely right. This is just the approval of the Open Meetings Act resolution. The language is boilerplate.
And then we all have to sign. So
You do have to
anybody
sign.
concerned about the Open Meetings Act resolution? Ms. Noble and then Mr. Garcia.
I'm not concerned about it, but I would ask that when we post our meetings, can we merge the two calendars? I think it's the way it is now. If you look for a board meeting, and I've had this come up a number of times during the year, you get every other Tuesday, and the public doesn't really understand the difference between regular board meetings and study sessions. So I would ask that we just have one calendar, because what we have is two here on 2 pages, and I would love to see them integrated and just labeled as study session versus regular
So
board
basically
meeting.
an overall board calendar.
Yeah.
Got it.
Do we need to change language, though, in this resolution?
Oh, yeah, we're not there yet. No, we're just on the resolution. You're right, that's item C. So on B, are we good
Oh,
with the
sorry.
Open Meetings
Okay.
Act?
Yes,
Or do we want to
sorry.
do away with the part where we
Good
can't
with the
talk?
Open Meetings
I
Act.
recommend that we go ahead and approve resolution.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Or, okay. Ms. Price?
Under where it says executive sessions, I would like more clarification. That doesn't say much. Number 5, line 57.
And so, Madam President, Mr. President, members of the board, this is language that that you've used every year. I don't think
Yeah.
it was anything that was rewritten. So I'm going to have to rely on the historians on the board or council or anyone else who has an idea on this. If we need to define executive sessions as to limited to personnel, is that what you're saying, limited to personnel?
Yeah, what does it have to look like?
I don't know the
That's
answer
defined
to
in the
that.
act, though, isn't it? Isn't that defined in the act? I mean, it's not here in our resolution, but
Right.
what we can and cannot discuss is defined in the act.
That's why I would like to see it.
So you, okay, now we may be up against a timeline. Could we approve this and then come back and amend it? Because I think we're in a timeline crunch of having this approved tonight, is my understanding. Or could we have language that says, as defined under these three categories, as section 1015-1H2, threatened pending litigation, 1015-1H7, discussion of purchase, acquisition, and disposal of real property, 1015-1H8. With
But
that,
are there other
reasons for an
provisions under which you'd have executive session than these three?
I don't think so. Is there another one?
There are that don't apply to the school board, but what I could do is add language that executive sessions to discuss matters exempted from OMA will be conducted on an as-needed basis, 1 hour prior to the start of the regular board meeting. Would that work?
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes, I could add language to the effect that executive sessions of the board to discuss matters exempted from the Open Meetings Act will be conducted on an as-needed basis 1 hour prior to the start of a regular board meeting.
That's what it says now, right?
It doesn't say that executive sessions are to discuss matters exempted from OMA, so we would just
I see.
insert the reasons for, without having to spell out all of the exceptions, many of which don't apply to the school board.
But that's not going, I mean, that's back to where she was at, so
Right,
that's
but
why
no-
I was saying, can we do these?
Can we, would that language suffice, Ms. Price?
Mm-mm.
So did you want these that we know apply to us, limited personnel, and do the section, the threatened or pending litigation, do the section, discussion and purchase, acquisition and disposal of real property, do the
See, it
section?
just seems to me it's not specific enough.
That's why I'm saying if we added these three that apply to us.
Just really quick on that note, Board Member Price, I know, I think I know where you're going with this. Whenever the county has executive session, they actually outline pretty much if they're gonna do property acquisition, they actually name the property or they actually name what they're gonna actually talk about. They don't have to come out and say what they discussed, but it is about this certain property. But when it comes to personnel matters, I understand that we can't put the names of individuals up there, obviously.
Well, and we
Is that
don't
what
do
you asked
that
for
for
more
property
detail?
either, because that would be giving away our leverage in a number of cases on what we may or may not want to do with property. So we don't name the property. What I would suggest we do is that,
Is there a time
that's
constraint?
exactly.
When is
Does
it?
this have to be done tonight?
Yes.
It,
That's my
it should be
understanding.
done tonight, President
Then,
Carrillo.
Ms. Price, would it be okay with you if we pass this tonight? And the expectation is that we have,
Revisit it?
we are able to amend it later.
Okay,
Would that be okay?
yes.
All right. Do you want to go ahead and then make the motion? You can make a motion if you want, or I'll entertain a motion.
Mm-mm.
I recommend that we go ahead and approve Resolution 2018-2019-1, Open Meetings Act.
I'll second with the understanding that we're going to be amending it to be more specific on executive session. Will you accept that amendment?
Yes.
Great. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, passes unanimously. Next item is the Board of Education meeting calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This follows the calendar as the pattern that you've had thus far.
However, and I wouldn't expect Ms. Behar to know this, but Yom Kippur begins at 5 o'clock in the evening on September 18th. So I would suggest that then we change December, and it goes for 2 days. So we change the September 18 meeting to Monday, September 17. Group, yes, Ms. Cashman.
I'd also like to make a change that we do not schedule the March 26th meeting. My rationale for that is then we will need to have board review on that Friday, which happens to be Good Friday. And I know not everybody celebrates or honors that, but I do know a lot of our staff take that time off and they would have to come in. The other thing is our annual school board conference starts on March 30th, so people might be leaving earlier and we potentially might not have a quorum. So I would like to scrap the March 26th meeting, and if we needed it at a later date, go back and add it on.
So the school board conference starts on the 30th, which is a Friday, so if people are going early, the earliest they would go if they were going, attorneys going for the legal would be the Wednesday. They're not. I mean, they could. I asked for this to be here as a placeholder, and I'm perfectly fine, you know, maybe changing it to the 27th. No, that doesn't give enough time either. I just put it there as a placeholder because it's right in the middle of budget. That's the only reason I added it.
I think we could plan, if we do need a special meeting, we could let you know, but I think we managed this process pretty well this year, and I think we could. Now, here's the other thing is when the legislature finishes up, it's a 60-day session, and when we get the unit value, maybe later, so we may be into April next year just because of the legislative session. But I also agree, I came in this year, I typically do not work on Good Friday, but I did. But I know it is a hardship for some staff because that is a very holy day for us.
So is it okay with, yes, Ms. Price?
I just wanted to say that I really would like that we not schedule anything for Good Friday in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is the city of the Holy Faith, right? And as I said last year, if you have something scheduled for Good Friday, you can schedule it all you want. Nobody's coming, okay? It's the second highest holy day in the Christian faith. So, and that's one weekend. That weekend is pretty awesome for Christians. So I would just like us not to plan anything, not to plan anything for Good Friday ever.
Okay. So holding that, then is it okay with the board to get rid of the meeting on the 26th? Yes? Okay,
Yes.
so ixnay that meeting. Is it okay with the board to change September 18, the Tuesday meeting, to Monday, September 17? Okay. Any other changes that you see? Ms. Cashman?
I do agree with Board Member Noble, if we could combine both calendars, so it's still, and then just annotate regular board meeting, study session, so it's all there instead of having people switch between two.
I'm sorry, I'm dense this evening, I'm dense a lot of days. Okay, so the study session is on a separate page, you're just asking to combine them all in there.
So that when it's on the website, people can just see, it's easier to see.
Follow the dates.
Yeah.
Right, and I think we can designate the colors of what's a regular board meeting, because as that is important. Mhm.
Yes,
All right.
and it tripped up a number of people this year when I said we have a board meeting scheduled, and somebody came back at me and said, I don't see it on the website, because they were looking under board meetings, not under
Versus
study
regular
sessions.
meeting and
And
study
I was
session.
using the term just as the board is meeting.
Mr. Garcia, first I'm going to do a motion to accept the calendar as amended.
Second.
And then, did you have your hand up?
Just gonna make a
You're
motion.
going to do the same thing? Okay. Additional discussion? All right, that's done. Oh, I'm sorry. We have to vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. All right. Next item on the agenda, board discussion, possible action. Okay, so the reason this is here And it's because we basically at our, oh, and I wanted to say to Ms. Noble that Robert watches from the office when he's not here. Oh, it's election day. What do you know? Rudy, do you have any idea what's going on? Anybody texting you? Oh, okay. So the reason this is here is I wanted to remind the board, and when we basically had our Moroccan bazaar where we were spending down the Alvoid money, right? And we had all of the priorities. Because I talked to the superintendent about this, we do have the ability within, this next year, if something rises to a level of importance for us to want to move that money around again, we can, simply with a budget adjustment request, right? I know I'm right. But so the reason I brought this up is because communities and schools provides, in some cases, provides the work that we were looking to have maybe relative to counseling or different things. And this could be discussed with the superintendent. But if there is a way that we're able to deliver, or communities and schools is able to deliver services that we allocated funds for, I would want to increase our allocation to communities and schools because they're already embedded in so many of our schools with proven success. That's why it's there, just to kind of throw it out there. And so if there's the need, if they're underfunded for some reason or something happens, I would want them to have the ability to come to us and say, any chance at, and for us to be able to say, Dr. Garcia, how does this sound to you? And for us to be able to do that. Dr. Garcia.
Just on that point, Mr. President, members of the board, as I said to you, but I just want everybody to remember that I'm not spending a penny of it until we do a bar. Each one of those will require a bar, every single thing that's on that list.
Right.
So
And
you'll
then
have an
obviously,
opportunity to look at each one and change your mind or whatnot.
okay. And waiting for that sale to close, which is next week, hopefully. That final piece.
Right, but I'm actually waiting to see where things shake out as we review our processes in business finance department. I just want to make sure that till we close out and we get started, I don't want to spend a penny.
Ms. Noble, then Ms. Cashman.
Point you in my direction. And my question would be, if at some point we are going to be revisiting, my preference would be to do it in a more complete way of the whole list with the update from finance rather than an individual bars. So, if and when the sale happens and the superintendent has done the reviews that she would like to do, my question would be, should the board look at the whole menu comprehensively again with the ideas of anything that has changed in terms of communities and schools and whatever else? Because we did see, for instance, with PACS, a fairly significant change from one time to the next. So it would strike me as prudent to revisit that when we have a more fulsome amount of information around the whole thing.
So the first thing that'll happen is there'll be a bar saying we got this big fat check, right, that we're going to approve. And then from there, examining what you're talking about. Well, it'll be a bar, it'll be money coming in, so we'll end up seeing it in a bar.
Right, and so as the budget being a plan, it's in the budget now because we projected, but we're not expending, and then we will do a bar when we receive the money, right, Mr. Halford? And then from that point forward, if we're going to put it, so right now it's everywhere, right? And then as we look at, okay, we're going to put this in the FTE line item and this one in the purchase services line item, and this, we have to move it to the appropriate line items, and so that would come to you.
Okay. So the only reason I had this here was, as this comes to us, that we look at, do we want to expand the services of communities and schools if in fact the work they're doing is very similar to the initiatives that we were putting forward. Okay, that's why I put it on today. So the next item that's mine too is Chaparral Elementary School analysis. So the reason I wanted this here is I wanted a better understanding of, is there an advantage? Because I know that one of the first things that happen, is there an advantage to separating at Chaparral? Because I know one of the first things we did in the last meeting was to say, nope, the board wanted, and that's fine, the board wanted to have all three considered at the same time. But I wanted to further examine or further understand if there really was an advantage to saying, okay, if we can make this decision first, we really are getting out in front of, allowing ourselves maybe an extra year or 2 years to get out in front of the planning, so that if we were to complete that elementary school, it would be done maybe in 2021 or 2022 rather than 2024. So I know that I don't see Ms. Yonda Wagner here, so what's great. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So I did have a conversation with our Chief Operations Officer, and also our project planner is here, Mr. Romero. So they do work together. It would seem like you could look at Chaparral by itself and say, yes, you identified that for a rebuild. However, if the board were to decide that you don't want to close Nava and or EJ, you have to look at where they are in the plan, and Nava would be ahead of Chaparral. So it does sort of, as she explained to me, Nava, in terms of where they fall in, with PSFA and what they require, would be ahead of Chaparral for a rebuild. So since you haven't decided about Nava, to put Chaparral ahead to say we're going to rebuild it and do X, Y, and Z, it's a little difficult. I mean, obviously the board, we work for you, and whatever you all decide, we make work. But that was what she shared with me to share with you, is that it puts it out of sync.
I understand that, thinking that it puts it out of sync, but it's our operations department's own information that is so compelling. That is, why would you ever rebuild Nava as opposed to Chaparral, based on all the red, yellow, and green that was, in the information that we had? I mean, I think it'd be patently irresponsible of CRC to approve a rebuild of Nava, given what we know physically about the property.
Well, I guess it just depends what you all decide about those two properties, because let's just say all things being equal, then in terms of facilities improvement, if you're going to keep that school intact, it would come up next. That's all I'm saying. And so I get it. And part of recommending Chaparral and then the increase where the kids would go to, right, was had Nava being closed. And so then that changes what that looks like and what happens to EJ, so, and the boundaries. And so that they do all fit together, in that's how it was presented. And then, of course, you had the decision tree. I don't have it in front of me. But that was my understanding. Mr. Romero, do I have it right?
I have the decision tree too. Yeah.
Board President, Superintendent, and board members, that is correct. An additional factor too is the under-enrollment of the schools, and creating a new school at the size that we would like to build it.
Excuse me just a moment. I just want to be able to, all of us to be able to say so long. Thank you for coming tonight. I understand. Take care. Thank you, Mr. Romero.
Thank you. And just to wrap up, was that it could compound the issue of the under-enrollment if we have an additional facility and we're still maintaining these other facilities too at the same time.
All right. For me personally, I understand those as reasons. They are not enough to me, for me personally, to say you don't start on something that you know is just, it's just staring you right in the face, staring me anyway, right in the face. And then just, that's the only reason I put this here. But I got to tell you, this last week, was it 2 weeks ago or was it last? Oh, it was the 29th. It was last week. And there were 4 of us, so if it's split 2-2, it would have been moot anyway. But I just, all week long, I was just thinking like, damn, I wish we could have made a decision. Because I just feel like, it just didn't feel good that now this is being put off for potentially, you know, another year, a year and a half, 2 years, and it's like, you know, Inez is going to write another editorial saying don't do it. You know, someone else is going to write another editorial saying close those East Side schools, even though they're A schools and doing so well. I mean, there's a point at which we just got to like get a handle on this. So anyway, that's all I have for board. Oh, the pond thing. Well, you can, okay. And then the pond thing, obviously, until we make a decision, we're definitely not putting pond in EJ or Nava, right? Because otherwise it's just a waste of money.
I believe that is correct.
Okay, that's all. I believe that's correct, suffices. Thank you for your, okay, Ms. Cashman.
I don't know why we're even addressing this based, I know, but I'm just saying is, I am not aware of anything that has changed within a week on the board. I would find it very fiscally irresponsible to obligate to rebuild one school when we haven't talked about what is happening to those other schools. And I would not want to obligate the 2021 bond for an elementary school unless we make a bigger decision, because basically between our high schools and our middle school Ortiz and our alternative schools, they could take up the whole next bond. And so I agree with you. I wish we did make a decision. It was a 3-1 vote to postpone. What that means, I will throw out to the board, since we're talking about this, this decision is hard, changing boundaries is hard. Just for something for board members to think about, it's not any harder than when the military has to close military bases. And the only way that they could get agreement, because everybody doesn't want to close the base in their area. And so in order to get that through Congress, it was a vote. You accept all the recommendations or none. It was an up or down vote. You couldn't say, but not for my school, not for my area. And I think that's something for the board to think about. If we're not closing schools, then the next discussion will have to go on to boundaries. And I foresee boundaries being more contentious than closing schools. So a decision was made. When we revisit it, that's an arbitrary time frame. It doesn't have to be within a year, but I would not support anything right now obligating district money. I think it would be financially irresponsible until we decide what we're going to do about aging facilities and excess capacity. Those don't go away whether we have a new governor. They don't go up, our facilities will continue to age. So, you know, when the board is ready to make a decision, then I think, again, we should move forward. But until the board wants to make a decision, you know, I already have visions of repurposing some of those properties, and that could be a pre-K facility for the district, maybe even 2. But we need to talk about this, but I would like us not to keep on bringing it up until there's some
This
sort
was,
of...
in the interest of sticking to board discussion, this was only there because I wanted clarity on would it be advantageous. And the staff has said no, so no. Anything else for the board on board discussion for tonight? Ms. Noble.
It's slightly related, but I would love us to schedule a board retreat for early August, if we could, because I feel like we need to be able to have some strategic discussions about how we're going to approach some of these things, how we frame questions even, because this obviously has been a very facility-centered process. It was the question that we asked staff to bring. And of course, we've all ruminated, I'm sure, over the past week and even plenty of time before. But I wonder about, the science behind student achievement and how we create the best environment for students. We know there's a certain amount of science around small schools and safety and other things, but I think that it would be great to have a board retreat where hopefully we can do some of this work in terms of priorities, strategy, how we're going to approach some of these discussions. So my hope is that before the end of June, we can schedule a board retreat for early August.
Okay, so that having been said, so we're looking at a Saturday, probably in August, probably from 9 to noon. Is that what you're thinking, or 9 to 1, or 10 to 3, or? I mean, so time-wise, at least time-wise, what would the board's preference be? Like 10 to 3 to allot that amount of time? Or do you want to start at 8 in the morning? Because then we can start to narrow down days and give staff an idea of what's what. Time-wise, just quickly, boom, boom, boom. 4 hours. Okay, 4 hours. Do you want it to be 10 to 2? Have a little lunch? 9 to 1? Okay.
I would prefer early in August, but I guess the superintendent, that
Because
is
they're
a
also opening
very,
schools.
I was going to say that's a very busy time for our staff, but I would prefer, I wouldn't even mind at the end of sometime in July, but I don't know if the board's ready for that.
So what if we said like the second or third Saturday in August? Yeah, right. So what would you say about, what's the second?
I'm looking at when school starts. I know the first weekend in August, we have the Leadership Institute. We're coming off of that. When's the first day of school? Staff? August 14th? So maybe the following weekend?
And is that a Wednesday?
So would the following Saturday be okay?
Would it be okay for you, because you're the...
Yeah.
For?
Personally, I might not be able to be there, depends, because I've got one daughter that I have to take back and move into college.
She can't move herself?
No.
She's a sophomore, for God's sake.
No, she'll be a junior, but they're
Oh.
moving into
I'm
a
just-
new
okay.
apartment. No, and I've already
I know.
obligated.
I understand.
One has already moved in, but so.
So well, you have to be at the retreat. So what day do you know you can't do it? Okay. I can reliably say right now I have no plans. Rudy has no plans either.
I think there's a giant Santa Fe High School reunion the first weekend of August.
So have it
That
like the third
includes my-
Saturday?
So are we
That
looking,
includes my
school
class.
started on the 14th. Can somebody help me over there? What would be the appropriate weekend after that?
August 18th is the Saturday after that.
And is that the third Saturday of August?
It is.
Yeah, and I would not be available
So maybe
on
the
that.
following one,
And
the 25th?
probably.
Would that be okay with the rest of you guys?
What is it, what date?
The 25th
August
of
25th.
August.
Then I'll work with the president about the details.
There's no day game for football, is there? Híjole, there's priorities. Okay, August 25th, 9 to 1.
Okay, and I'll work with you.
Yeah, and that can, yeah, so bring ideas prior to then, because we're not meeting, and, I mean, the ideas can even come in August, about, so we're laser focused in using our time.
And let me know, like, if you want a facilitator or not.
No,
all
do we
of
want
that.
to, no, no.
Whatever you want, it's fine.
I want Obama to come facilitate.
Okay, I'll work on this.
Okay. Did you guys read, okay, this is board discussion still. Did you guys read that thing where the valedictorian at the high school in Eastern Kentucky? Where he said a quote, it's like, oh, God, I wish I had it in front of me. You know, make sure that you not just have a seat at the table, but you're at the head of the table. And he credited it to President Trump. And then everyone went wild because it is Eastern Kentucky. And then he said, just kidding, it was Obama. And the entire audience fell silent. It's in today's paper.
Yeah.
And it's hysterical. But anyway, so Obama won't come?
No, I'll work on trying to get.
Okay. Maybe Obama or Magic Johnson
Okay.
for something inspirational. Anything else for board discussion? Anything else for advanced planning?
I do. She does too.
Ms. Noble? And then Dr. Garcia.
I'm wondering about the status of a soccer study session.
And I was just going to mention that, Mr. President.
Yes.
That staff is not ready to do soccer in June. Just the impact to the operations staff, and then there's some personal illness issues that are being addressed, and so we're not able to do that. We thought we could, but we can't pull it off.
So, and that was going to be on the 20, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That was
It-
supposed to be on the last study session.
26.
The 26th. So why don't we leave the 26th there for now as a placeholder, right? But with the understanding that it's not going to be on athletic facilities, which means, unfortunately, we won't be able to do that until August. Okay. Ms. Noble? Well, I mean, you know, if we have to do it, if the board says you have to do it, they'll do it. But, okay, I'm just, you know. I don't know. All right, so beginning of August, that's going to be okay?
If we tell the superintendent she has to fly, there are
No,
constraints.
she'll find a way to do it. No, I hear you. Okay. So, anything else for advanced planning?
Just want to point out, just in case there's some confusion, Mr. President, with people in the audience, if anybody's still watching, or for the board, you might notice June 12th, it says a special meeting and then a study session. And because of the way the resolution on, I can't remember the bond that you did earlier.
We have to.
Mr.
have to
Melendra
have
says
it.
you have to have a meeting, you have to adjourn, and then you can start over, so.
Right.
It's a procedural thing, that's why it's listed that way.
Correct.
Okay. 5, and it's quick, because they just do a presentation on the bond, we vote, that's over. And then we adjourn to 5:15. Okay, anything else for this evening, gang? All right, we're adjourned.